Welcome back. I am so excited that you have joined me again in the Aligned Womb, Aligned You podcast. I'm Kate Nagai, and I am your host and womb guide on this journey. I'm here to help you to lean into the language of your menstrual cycle so that you can align yourself and awaken and activate to your womb wisdom to live the most inspired life. I am so excited to jump into this episode and to dive into today's topic. So let's get started. Welcome everyone to the Aligned Womb, Aligned You podcast. Today we have a guest with us. We have Jesica Medellin with us. She is an author, a speaker, and a body positivity advocate. She is the creative author of the book First Moon Manual, Letters to Our Daughter, which is a compilation of letters, art, and poetry about menstruation. Jesica has a master's degree in education with an emphasis in curriculum and instruction design and a bachelor's degree in communication and journalism. And this year, in 2023, she was Utah Humanities Book Festival featured author. That's a mouthful. Jesica is passionate about helping young women feel informed, empowered, and positive about their menstrual cycles. She believes that menstruation is a natural and beautiful part of being a woman, and she wants to help young women celebrate their bodies and their cycles. Jesica is a frequent speaker at schools, libraries, and community events. She's also offering workshops and online courses on body acceptance and period positivity. And she is here today to join us so that we can talk all about how we can emotionally support young women as they embark on their period journey, as well as how the same work can help older women heal their inner child around menstruation. Welcome, Jesica. I am so excited to have you here. And I was just sharing with Jesica because I just got her book, The First Moon Manual, Letters to Our Daughters. And it literally arrived 15 minutes before I hopped on this call with her. And I am so excited to dive into this conversation while flipping through the manual at the same time. So thank you, Jesica, for being here.
Thank you, Kate. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'm so glad it arrived. And I know that the mail between the US and Canada takes a little bit longer. So I'm glad it showed up today.
It showed up in the most perfect aligned time. So can you tell us, Jesica, before we get into this conversation, what is this book? Because this book is amazing from what I'm seeing, flipping through it a few minutes before we jumped on this call together.
Yeah, so I called it a manual because it felt very manually, right? Like it's not a book, it's not a journal, it's not a coffee table book, right? It has art and poetry and letters and some short stories and then period tips, but then each letter has a reflection space and creative space, and there's affirmations and places to make your own affirmations. So it's just so much more. So I kind of called it a manual, even though it's not like an instruction booklet. But if it were to give you instruction, it'd be like emotional instructions, right? Like just the instruction of like loving yourself no matter what, right? Does that resonate?
Totally resonates. So I do have one question because I was looking through the first few pages on it, and like a lot of the journaling prompts, for instance, like how does it feel to know my body and my cycle, and that my cycle mirrors the moon? Is this something that a mom would want to journal in for her daughter of like how this has been impactful for her life, for her daughter? Or would this be something that a journaling prompt for your daughter to write about her own period?
So I think it's the journey of either, right? Yes, you can journal in it for your daughter. You can create some space and put your own thoughts in it and then have her also journal in it. She can journal in it herself, or I have so many older women who are holding it and going, man, I still need this, right? So they're going through their own healing journey with their menstrual cycle, whether they have like PCOS or PMDD or all these things that have affected women over the years that we're just now really getting a good understanding around. And so I think it can be used any way that a mom wants to use it. And I have had a couple moms tell me that they read through it first and they made sure that it was like the information that they wanted their child to know. And then it just felt like a really good tool to help their child along their journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I noticed at the back, there was information around pads and tampons and like there's eating for your PMS. Like there's a lot of good information in here as well. And I also noticed that there's a lot of beautiful reflection pieces, which honestly, in the work that I do, I think that's a missing piece for a lot of us, is that we haven't been taught to connect with our menstruating body or with our period. We've been taught to connect with it only as this biomarker that happens,
Mhm.
and well, I guess in some ways to want to avoid it or wish it gone, but not to really reflect on how informative it is to us and how it actually guides us in how we interact in our life. So the
So
journaling
two
prompts are
things,
beautiful.
two things there. I just want to say, first of all, yes, there is some information, but there's enough information about menstruation out there that I didn't want another book that had a lot of like medical jargon or technical jargon in it. So I made it very light and easily digestible. I was a teacher for many years, and I knew how my students kind of consumed information. So I wanted it to be very easily digestible for kids to get like the piece of information they needed. So it's very light, but I think impactful, right? So the eating for your PMS, it doesn't say like follow this diet. Oh, you can only eat this. It's to say like here's some good guidelines: lots of water, lots of fruits and vegetables, lean protein like chicken. You know, the part about the feminine products, the menstrual products, is like here's what they are, and here's how you can use them. You know, like it's not a lot of complicated information. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. Totally makes
And
sense.
yes, I wanted my own daughter to have a vastly different experience with her period than I had. I don't think it was my like anybody's fault that my experience was what it was. It's just that we didn't have the information back then, and we didn't have the like mental health um awareness. We didn't have the emotional awareness that we have today, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted her to have just a vastly different experience, and I wanted her to honor her body and not feel shame around it. Which growing up, like my very first experience with my period, it was shamed by like the school bully in like the school locker room, and it felt so embarrassing. And then I had this shame around it for years after that. And I didn't want her to feel that. So when she came upon her first moon, I reached out to family and friends, you know, like and asked them for advice or a letter of support. It was during COVID, so we couldn't have the celebration that I wanted to have, like a big, like first moon party. So I had family and friends just write these letters. And once we sat down and we started to read those letters, and mind you, my daughter's 13, we were both in tears. You know, we're crying about the love and the support. And I kind of knew at that moment, like every girl needs to feel the support and this love. She needs to feel this held when she starts her menstruation, and she needs to feel this loved, and only in that capacity can she love her body fully, right? Like we are told as women to have like self-love, body love, but they never talk about menstruation love, right? And if you constantly have these negative words and this negative jargon around like your period or your body, that's a piece of your body that you're hating every month, right? That's a lot of time to not like yourself. So I say that true self-love starts with loving our periods, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. And yeah, you know how you're saying that you wanted to keep it simple. I'm just on this one page here where you have little bits of information for them, like just one-liners, but they're on like these little sticky note images. And it's so beautifully graphically done that it caught my eye. And it's simple and it's easy and I could see how it's digestible for someone coming into their bleed that's unsure, feeling awkward. Like this is just, it's really beautifully done. So
Well,
I'm
and
so
I
excited.
think that, so I'm very supportive of my daughter, and this was for her, right? So I think that it's for every mom. It's not like if a mom says, "Oh, I support my daughter, there's no worries." Well, no, there's no worries. Exactly. There's a place for you to put your own dedication letter. It's meant to look very scrapbooky, so you can add your own, like if you have your own family or friends to reach out to and they want to add a couple letters to it. It's meant to be interactive so that your daughter can write her own tips, or you can write in tips. Also, anything that I might have forgotten or isn't talked about in there. And And all that information was gathered from just this wonderful tribe of women, like from California to Virginia Beach, and even someone from Spain. So, like, it's just like this beautiful compilation of like information and tips and I don't know, like a great energy, right?
So I'm guessing your inspiration to create the First Moon Manual was your daughter and
Yes.
your own experience. Is there some deeper stuff that you want to share about what inspired you to start this?
Yeah, so I worked in a school district. I have taught and I was watching so many girls struggle, you know. They were struggling with their own self-worth and their own body worth, and it made me very conscious with my own daughter about how we spoke in our house, the things we said, my own body image. I've been heavy my entire life, like, well, since I've been pregnant. So like since like 23, I've been on the heavier side. And I really started taking a good hard look at my own words and how I talked about my body. And I really thought about how I would never want my daughter, no matter how she looked, to talk about herself the way that like I've talked about myself. And I watched these other young women that I was teaching go through all these struggles with boys and love and body image and peer pressure and just all the things. So that was like the core inspiration, right? Is just like not only creating something that would help my daughter feel whole and love herself and just feel like menstruation was just a natural part of life, and you could fight it and hate it and make yourself miserable, or you could accept it and rest and eat right and kind of, you know, feel better, and just make sure she honors that as she gets older. And that was just that core kind of feeling I had when I started to create this. And it all came together very intuitively. Every letter, I I either know the women personally or I know them from their Instagram pages. So I've followed their poetry, or I, you know, followed their pages and watched their journey. So every page that's designed is designed with the person in mind. So, and I just very did it like very intuitively. And every person said to me, like, my page is perfect. Like when I would send it to them and say, do you approve of this? Do you want me to change anything? They'd be like, oh my gosh, you made it look like me, you know? And yeah, I think that's it. It was just that really big desire to help young women just feel really whole, you know?
Mm. I think that's so beautiful. And I think that's what our society really needs right now is the feminine needs to heal. It's been silenced or it's been shamed for so long. And I'm not saying that we need to be feminine dominant in our society, but we need to have healing to really feel into what it means to be feminine, what it means to be cyclical, what the beauties in it, right? That there is so much beauty in being different. And, you know, I have a teacher that always says there's a million different ways to do the exact same thing. Right. So, but we are so
Absolutely.
trained in our society to only see things in one way, to only be linear, to only operate through this masculine lens, not male, but masculine. And there's something so beautiful that when we start to bring healing into this idea of cyclical living and cycle awareness and feeling empowered by our body, that there's just a different journey that we can live.
Yeah, just when you were talking, you were saying like one lens, and I just think of the difference between just me and my own husband, you know, like he can see one thing, and sometimes that's great, but I'm very much zoom out and see the whole picture. And whether it's feminine, masculine, whether it's just our personalities, I'm not sure, but it does feel very much like that. Like, and that's the way we live in our society. I thought after COVID we would have a vastly different education landscape, and they've just gone back to the same old thing. It's been very frustrating, right? It's like we went through this really hard thing and we found this new way to teach and this new way to live, but everybody wanted to get back to what they called normal. You know, they wanted that normality. Our COVID experience, while I know I was very blessed, it was so different than everyone else's. We were so blessed to be at home. We got to work from home. We were both teachers and we got to be with our kids. And that was like, for the first time, that's when I decided, I'm like, my life has to change. You know, like I can't be doing this, leave the house early in the morning, not get home till late at night, you know, constantly giving myself to other people, I kind of knew at that moment that I had to change. I think a lot of people have had that change, right? It's why we're having the problems in the workforce. I'm not sure what Canada's doing, but in America, there's a lot of like people are having a hard time finding employees, but it's because people have found a way to work from home or they found a way to make ends meet, whether that's living with a group of people or their own parents or whatever. They're finding this new way to live because they don't want to be working the long hours.
Yeah.
And that does feel very feminine, right? It feels like, okay, like the rest, the bringing it back to the home, making sure everybody's nurtured, but also living like their best life.
Well, and you said something there about everybody's nurtured, but I think if we go back into the lens of the feminine and traditionally how communities operated, there was also space for us to rest, right?
Yes.
There was aunties and grandmothers, and there was a community that supported us. So not only as mothers we could nurture the world, but that we were also still nurtured. And
Yes.
that is something that has really disappeared. And I think that is something that's beautiful, that's slowly, hopefully, coming back into the world. Or that I think, like you said, with the COVID experience, that we're waking up to again, that we need rest, we need balance, we need people to trust us so that way we can truly live our best selves or be our best selves, right? Versus always feeling like we're under a microscope. So yes, I totally agree.
And this is that idea, right? The book is that idea is that I've taken other mothers, other aunties, other grandmas, and I've put them in this book because um, my grandmothers had passed away by the time this had started, so my daughter didn't have great grandmas and she did have her grandma, but we don't have a lot of females on my side, like as aunties, like so I took the community and I just created a space. So it's a tool for women who are there and they're able to emotionally support their daughters. And it's a tool for them to use. And it's also a tool for women who work 3 jobs and they need the tribe to help them, right? So it's like for everyone to just really hold space for their kids during this time and hold space for themselves.
Yes, I totally agree. So in this first moon manual, it is composed of a lot of letters. Why did you choose letters?
I think that letters just convey a message that seems very personal. So we can read stories and stories we resonate with, but a letter, like every letter was addressed to a young girl, right? So we took names out of it and just like dear gorgeous girl, dear beautiful girl, dear daughter, and so it felt when the girls read it, it feels very personal, like it's to them, it's like somebody's speaking to them.
That's so true. I never thought about that, but you're right. When I read an inspirational story, I can connect, I can feel inspired. But reading a letter, it hits a little bit deeper to home, like it is being wrote for me. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I just wanted everybody to feel like they were getting that message from somebody they knew. And the women we chose were all walks of life. So, entrepreneurs, coaches, traditional people who were a lot of just like different people who all had a different story and a different message to share.
For sure. And so in this manual, it's really a lot about self-love. And it's really about a lot of empowering through our experience of wholeness. I hope that resonates because that's what it feels like to
Yeah,
me.
absolutely.
So what does self-love mean to you? Because I know that this is one of the premises of this book for you.
Yeah, I think that self-love is a journey for me, like I said, as I've been on the heavier side my entire life. So I have kind of come and my period was very volatile. I had a very hard relationship with my own menstrual cycle. I would have it like every 3 months. It was very heavy. I mean, it was like crime scene heavy, like it was like a crime scene in my area all the time. Um, the cramps would take me out and nobody told me that maybe what I was eating could fix that. The doctors continually told me things like, they put me on birth control and then they suggested taking birth control 24/7 so that I didn't even have a period. And, and I'm, I'm in my 40s now. So I kind of grew up without the social media influence. And there's so many people out there now. Like once I came out with this book and I started looking into the information more, there's so much about just like resting during that time and eating right and teas you can drink and just all the things, right? So self-love for me has always been a challenge and it's always been really hard. But I didn't want it to be that way when I had my daughter because I didn't want her to struggle the way I had struggled. So self-love is just this all-encompassing acceptance of who I am, and what I look like. And that's in all ways. So it's the hard parts of me that sometimes get angry, or it's the other parts that get really sad and cry at weird times. And it's the happy times. Like it's just the all-encompassing wholeness, right? Of just
Mhm.
loving myself no matter what and loving myself through especially the hard times. So
Mhm.
just being very forgiving and giving myself grace. And that's what I hope I'm passing on to my daughter and hopefully other women too.
I'm curious, did you find this deeper appreciation for self-love and self-acceptance as you entered your 40s? Or is this something that's been on your I know for myself, I'm 42, almost 43 here. I'm coming up to 43 in a month. And the person I am now, I was like, man, I wish I was this person 20 years ago because I really, I could care less about a lot of, and I should say care less, but I am so vocal about where I'm at in my cycle. I'm okay with telling people that. I'm okay with being grouchy and explaining to my kids why, I'm irritable.
Mhm.
I am okay with appearing to be less than. I
Mhm.
I've had 3 kids and my body's not the same. And I don't predict that I'll ever will get back there again. And I'm just like this, when I look at my body, I'm like, this is because my body built 3 people, shrunk back down, grew again, and all like, because my 2 daughters are only 17 months apart. Like my body was like a yo-yo for so long. Like when I look at it, I just see beauty. And this big transformation, I
Yeah.
sometimes think is like, is this the perimenopause of just, which in the lens of looking at your cycle sacredly, this would be the archetype of the enchantress or wild woman who's just like, take me as I am, right? Like this is what you're getting. And I think it's so beautiful for us to show that version to our youth who are more innocent, are more socially concerned, and seeing that it won't always be that way. Cause I definitely was not this type of human being in my teens.
Yeah, I definitely think that part of it is coming to my 40s and just like that acceptance of like, here we are, right? I also think a big part of it is just the influence now that it's okay. So we didn't have that growing up. I didn't have there was a certain type of person, they looked a certain way, they dressed a certain way, they bought a certain thing. There was no encompassing, like I could follow other people who were thrift shop people and I could follow other people who dressed this other way. Like but our kids have that opportunity now. And so and I also think in the last like 5 to 10 years the divine feminine has just woken up in a way that it hasn't been awake in a while, right? And we're getting more in tune, so women are able to get more in tune with themselves. So it's happening in our 40s, but I think that there's an opportunity for girls to experience that self-acceptance and love like so much younger now, because there is, while there is social media that's like showing them a certain way, there is the opportunity to look at other ways. And there's other things to look at now. It's not just one way anymore.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I
Yeah.
love that. I think that is so beautiful, really, to make that our goal or our mission, right? Is
Yeah.
let's create this new experience. So I'm curious, what are some of the ways that you, and I'm going to use the word coach, but like loosely using the word coach, how do you coach yourself or your daughter to really embrace your own menstrual cycles?
Yeah. So I don't have a menstrual cycle anymore because I went through like an ablation and then a hysterectomy after some really um difficult things that happened. I had two tubal pregnancies, ectopic pregnancies. And so I've kind of been through this really weird roller coaster. But with my own daughter, I've really tried to help her just really accept where she is. So sometimes if I feel like her emotions are different than they normally are, we just take a minute and pause, like, hey, this isn't like what's normally going on. Is everything okay? Like, is something happening at school? And she'll do a self-check and she'll be like, you know what? I think I'm starting my period. Okay, cool. And I back off. Like, I think that's the thing with parents. And one of the things that I really loathe in our society is this idea that teens are horrible, because they're not horrible. They're just little humans trying to have a human experience, right? And how we react to them really is what catalyzes much of the behavior. So a lot of times, and I'm not perfect, right? So there's times when I do like snap back, and we both have to check ourselves and just be like, where was that coming from? And whether that's the stress I have from whatever's going on, or if it's her stress from school or her menstrual cycle, whatever. But when she is on her cycle, um, she doesn't try and take school off or anything, but there are days when I'll be like, do you want to stay home today? Because I can tell like you're not feeling good, you're in pain, you know. We use a lot of heating pads, and a lot of rest and cuddling up in blankets and just really trying to be loving. And especially at that time of the month, I really try and be a lot more nurturing, because I don't always feel like I'm a nurturer by trade. I've learned to be a nurturer, and I try to be more nurturing at that time too.
Mhm.
Um, I'm not exactly sure how I did it, other than this is just who I am, and this is what we've pushed, is like this book, just this acceptance of your period, making sure that she's comfortable, ensuring that she always has pads and tampons and or whatever she wants to use. But I do know that when we went to the doctor the other day and she was saying, I'm having this really painful period, the doctor said, oh, we can just put you on birth control. She's 16. And my immediate reaction was like, wait a minute, right? Because I started birth control at a young age, and I'm pretty sure it's what caused a lot of my issues later on in life. So I had some like reservations. And when we got in the car, she turned to me, she says, Mom, I don't want to be on birth control. And I said, well, you want to talk more about that? Like, I know the doctor said it would take away your period completely. Like, how do you feel about that? And she said, you've taught me we're supposed to have a period. That's not normal. Like, why would I take it away? So I know that whatever I've done, I'm just doing it right, right? She doesn't want to take away her period. She knows that it's natural. She knows it's normal. She wants to have a period. We haven't made it gross. We haven't shamed her. The boys in our house don't shame her. They're very accepting and loving and nurturing. So I don't know that there's an instruction manual for that, other than just being loving and nurturing, and probably just being the person that you wish you had when you were that age,
Mhm.
you know?
Well, and I'm curious with your hysterectomy, mainly because you do teach period positivity and this body awareness. Do you still feel as though you have a cycle? Because there is a theory out there. There are people who teach um, conscious living slash period positivity, that our cycle, once it's initiated at puberty, it doesn't leave us. It stays with us through menopause or through all the way till the day that we die. And so once our body has experienced and has been living cyclically for a period of time, it doesn't forget that. It's still this kind of innate reaction in the body to have these highs and these lows and to move within a pattern. Sometimes we notice with menopause that happens with the moon cycle and not so much with, because we don't have the physical bleed. So I'm curious, because I'm not there yet, but it is something that I sometimes teach, is this idea that even though we are menopausal or we've lost our cycle, that we can still be cyclical. So I'm curious, do you still feel like you have a rhythm?
Unfortunately, I never felt connected to my cycle, so I'm not sure, right? And I'm in the process of learning to be more intuitive and really listen to myself, because I know that when I don't listen to myself, when I make a decision, but then I falter and I decide something else, that the original decision is what I should have gone with, right? Like, So I'm just in the process of really tuning back into myself and really learning about my own body, myself. And this has been a huge journey for me because I kind of feel like that's what I was missing my entire life. And it's probably one of the reasons I wanted her to get really in touch with who she is and her body at a young age, because I was never taught how to do that. And I didn't know, you know. So I'm not sure, but I do know that I wax and wane as well, right? And that there's times when I'm more tired, and I can tell, like, when it's the moon cycles, then it's like a full moon, and I'm like, oh, I'm feeling a little bit tired, or I'm feeling a little more quirky than usual, or all the things that kind of go along. And I'm really learning to lean into that. And podcasts like your podcast and other ones that I've been listening to lately are really helping with that, just getting back in touch with who I am, and even my own sexuality, right? So just all the things.
So I know that when you reached out to me about the first moon manual, that you have some big goals. So what's next with this whole first moon manual?
Yeah, so my first big goal is just by May 28th of 2024, I really want this in the hands of at least 50,000 young women across the nation, maybe even across the world, right? I came up with this arbitrary number because I looked up the population of girls in Houston School District from 5th to 12th grade, and it was 50,000 roughly. And I thought, well, here's the thing is that's an achievable number. Then if that's the girls in one school district that's just an hour up the road, then across the nation, then that is what I know we can accomplish. And I just think, like, what a difference it will make if young women are tuning into themselves. And that's what so many of these questions are about, right? Um, if you look in the back, there's period tracking, and then behind every period tracking is also a set of questions. And they are questions like foods that make me feel good or foods that make me feel not so good, and this is all about that, like tuning into your body's like feelings, right? The hardest emotions to deal with. Did anybody ever ask you what your hardest emotion to deal with was? I mean, like, that's like an important question. And it's really an important question for women because we do get angry, and it's not because we're on our cycle, right? We get angry because we're angry. And nobody talks about that. They want to be like, oh, it's just because she's on the rack, she's being bitchy, right? But we don't, that's such a negative connotation. So it's basically, if I'm not on my cycle, I can't have any feelings, right? So I wanted to really have girls tuning into how they felt, what they felt, when they felt it. And I just think that if we had 50,000 girls across the United States or whatever, like leaning into this, feeling like what a change we could start making in society, right? So that's the first thing. My second thing is I have submissions for the next manuals up. I've been asked for manuals. One was on menopause. So we're ready to start the menopause manual for women who are going to start going through menopause. Like, we want to be very supportive of all issues that women are going through. And so I've got one for new moms. I had a friend who told me, like, what's a letter I'd write to another new mom? It'd be like, it's okay not to love them all the time. Like, it's hard, and we don't talk about the hard things as much, right? We get a bunch of arbitrary advice that can work or not work, but I want to create a safe space, a supportive space, letters that are dedicated to moms who are struggling with some of those feelings, like that it's hard to have a baby and it's not going to be all sunshine and roses, and they're going to cry, and it's not, you're going to feel very overwhelmed. Like, these are natural feelings, and let's not pretend like it's all sunshine and happiness, right? I want to do one on new marriages because I think that marriage is a chore. It's a job. It's like, I've been married 22 years, and it's something that I choose to do every day, and I want to make sure there's support for women so they don't feel like they're doing it all, or they don't feel like when it gets to a certain point, because they're so fed up, they just have only divorce as a choice. Like, I think here's some like ways to set those boundaries early on.
And I would say even having a marriage one for the 10-year mark and the 20-year mark, because, for me, at least in the beginning, I think we were going through fertility struggles when we first got married. so we were already working through so much hard stuff that really
Yeah.
brought us together like glue. So when we got married, we were solid. But the 10-year mark, because it hit around COVID, that
Yeah.
was a whole other story. That was the milestone where we were like, we are different people, and we're different people with young kids, and we're different people with young kids in a pandemic. And holy hell, we're seeing different sides of ourselves that we both never knew existed. And
Yes.
so the 10-year mark for me was the challenging one, but we made it through it, and our marriage is beautiful now. And so, but that hiccup, that road bump was a huge one that I wasn't prepared for, but I did. And maybe it's because I'm just that personality that I'm always observing. I've always been this way since a kid. Like I'm a sponge taking things in. And I remember my parents going through a time where, as a child, I was contemplating, are my parents going to get divorced? Right. Because
Yeah.
it was that angry in our household.
Yeah.
And, I don't remember what age I was at to know if it was the 10-year mark for them, but they're together and they've been together for 40 some years now. But I remember there was that contention point. And so I wonder sometimes at these milestones of like personal growth in a human being, if we're both becoming different people at 10 years, how we can reconnect. So please
Yeah,
make me a 10-year
absolutely.
manual.
No, and I always say, like, so my husband and I have been married 22 years, and we have had some serious bumps. He serves in the military. There's been time apart, like all kinds of like serious things that have happened. And I think about the times that it would have been so easy to divorce him. Like nobody would have blamed me. He wouldn't blame me. We would have just walked our separate ways and not a big deal. And then I think, but I wouldn't know the amazing person he is today. Like he has grown so much through that also. So yeah, I think that yeah, so a marriage manual, yes. And then I want to do one for women who are having to leave a relationship and getting divorced, like that they need to be held and supported too. A lot of times it's not their choice. They're either being forced into one or they're at the end of their own rope. And I want to hold space for them. And the fifth manual that is taking submissions right now is about our sexuality. Like women have been shamed so much about sex, and leaning into our sexuality is so important, and really connecting with ourselves is so important. And I know because I just listened to your podcast with somebody who was talking about sexuality just a couple of days ago. So um, it's just such an important subject right now, and I'm trying to raise my own daughter to lean in her own sexuality. Like we don't talk about it in society enough, so making sure that she knows how important it is to know what pleasure is, and ensure that she's like very open and self-aware. And it's a hard conversation because people are like, well, that's your kid, or she's so young, and I'm like, but for what? Like, when do you learn? I mean,
If we're
I
not
don't
teaching to them, they're going to go and find the person that's going to give them the answers. I am the result of a teen pregnancy. My mom was pregnant at 15,
Mhm.
and she was a family of 9 kids, baby of the family. And her parents, like, as much as I love my grandparents, they're amazing. They had 9 kids, but they were absent. So she went and found her answers. And
Yeah.
it resulted in a pregnancy at 15. Right. And I am so blessed because my parents stayed together through it all. And so my biological dad was married to my mother, his whole life. He just passed away last year.
Oh,
Um,
sorry.
but like they people will seek the answers, and so we can either teach our children about pleasure and
Mhm.
teach our children about sexuality, or we can let them venture in territories where they might not get the I don't want to say the right information, but the information that we would like them to have.
Yes. So we're creating a manual for women, and whether it will be for a certain age or not, I'm not sure. But yes, about embracing your sexuality and just really leaning into it, loving yourself, and being
Well,
able to.
my little two bits on that is that as women, if we're taught like with your manual about sexuality for women, when we start to reclaim it for ourselves, then we find the path and the language that we want to communicate it with our daughters. Right.
Absolutely.
And I think it does start with us. Because if we
Yes.
don't understand our own sexuality, if we are like, can't navigate it, there's no way we're going to have a conversation that's not awkward and that is actually helpful. So
Yes. And I think that, you know what, they're your kids. It's always going to be a little bit awkward, right? Like it's always, some people are very fine with talking about it. I'm still a little bit like, I don't want to think about my daughter and I'm having sex with my husband, right? Like I need them to be very separate. I need to
yeah,
not have either in the room. And I think it's because I'm just, like I'm a very empathetic person. So the emotions and the feelings are always there and they're always running. So it's very hard for me. I have to very much separate that. And my daughter sometimes like, Mom, I don't want to talk to you about this, but we do talk about it, right? So we do have those hard conversations. It'll always be a little bit awkward when it's with your kids. And I think that as a mom, like you just always want to think your kids are going to be so innocent and young and they're adults. And I'm just coming into this with my daughter who's 16. I'm like, man, she's just at the age where I'm no longer mommy, right? I am I am a guide and a counselor maybe at this point and just guiding her as best I can. And I'm hoping that all the things that I taught her when she was younger resonate. She remembers them, but she's going to make her own mistakes because they're supposed to, right?
yeah.
We made our own mistakes. They're supposed to make their own mistakes. They're supposed to learn their own lessons. And no amount of me telling her, like, oh, don't do this because it'll hurt, is going to make her not want to climb the tree or whatever, right? Like, so, and sometimes they can climb the tree better than you ever could. So I don't,
That's
it's
the
just so
hardest part
weird.
about being a parent.
So hard.
Oh my God, it's so hard. Because you're like, I know the lesson here, and I don't want you to do it because it's going to result in something that's not pleasurable. And then I watch them do it, and I'm like, wow, it was a good thing I kept my mouth shut because they found
Yeah.
their own way through it. And so, yeah. Oh my God,
Yeah.
this is
And that's the thing, right? Is they get to do that. They get to explore, they get to figure it out and them learning their own mistakes or going through their own experiences. I think that's a very masculine thing. Like it never worked before, so it won't work now. And businesses do it all the time and all these things, right? No, it never worked that way. We've tried it that way. We tried it that way. But when you come in, you're like, okay, we've tried it that way before, but we're going to try it again, or we're going to try it this way this time. And that's what our kids are. They're our next people. They're the ones who are saying, okay, well, you tried it before, but now I'm going to try it this way. And they might see their way through it and they might fall and burn, but that's okay because they're here for a human experience. And that's just what they're here for, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's so beautiful. Well, I right now am vowing that I am going to help you get to that 50,000
Thank you.
mark goal. So anybody who's listening to this, in the show notes, you are going to find the link for the new moon or the first moon manual. And then it's also going to be on my website. And as Jessica launches the rest of these series or the rest of these journals as they come out, you can also find those on my website as well. You just have to go to the shop page under the products I love, and you will find a link there to purchase them as they become available. But I highly recommend everyone going to grab the First Moon Manual. And Jessica, before we end this call, because I know that we're pretty close to time here, I always like to end these calls with a word of wisdom to the audience, to the listeners. So what is your womb-led tip that you would like to share with our listeners today?
I think that my womb-led tip is to take a minute and just go back into your own self and remember how you were at that age and the feelings you felt and decide what you want to be different. And if it's not for your own daughter, for your sons or for your niece or for your granddaughter, or for whoever is kind of in that space, and intuitively do what you need to do to make sure that they have a different experience.
I love that. Yes. Thank you so much for that. So once again, all of Jessica's information is going to be in the show notes below. Go and grab this book. It is so great. Thank you so much, Jessica, for coming. Thank you so much for sharing this wisdom and this beautiful book out into the world. I'm going to start diving into it today and start going through it and journaling some stuff because my daughter is 9, going on 10, and it can happen any day. And I want to have this ready for her when that happens. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you so much.
Are you excited about aligning to your cycle? If so, make sure that you subscribe to this podcast and like the episode if it really resonated with you. Until next time, remember, womb wisdom equals connection to self, which ultimately equals inspired living.